There's a song that comes to mind. I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing. So it's better to be really looked and respected by just a small group of people. I think that's really a really nice way of it.
You launched your first production. How was it?
Really scary. Really scary. Very scary.
Why so?
The fact that it's live means something could go wrong. And I think that we kind of like that. We're like, we don't actually know exactly what's going to happen, and that's actually the joy of live theatre. And that's what we say, like, backstage, like, things can go wrong, and that is what literally what happens. Things go wrong all the time. I think it's many people's fear, right? For an actor to come be like, you come and join me on stage, I would hate that. But as a producer, I think it's fun. Yeah. Also, a benchmark of success is when people come out and they're like, "Oh, it's over already." Like I didn't feel the time go. I think that's because your attention is gripped by what is happening on stage. I think that's for me always very satisfying. The key lesson that I learned in drama school is essentially that you need to get out of your head. And so we, as humans, we're so intellectual, we're thinking all the time. But actually, in order to be a good actor, you want to always lead from the heart. For me, why do I go to the theatre? I go because I want to be touched by the heart and touched by the head as well. As in, I want to be intellectually motivated or inspired and emotionally inspired as well. And those two things have to go together. And I hope that that's also what our audience members experience as well.
Hi, welcome to the next episode of Beyond the Bubble. Today's guest is Ed McMillan. He is the founder and artistic director of The Bridge Theatre, an English language theatre in Brussels, Belgium. We had a very interesting conversation about what makes a good actor, how it is to launch a theatre in a city from scratch, what makes the audience resonate with the performance that he puts on, and how drama and psychology come together in the form of theater. As always, please like and subscribe to the channel on Spotify, on YouTube, and perhaps on LinkedIn. And please send us comments, send us feedback, tell us if you like the show, what other guests you'd like to hear, and any other feedback is more than welcome. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, Ed. Welcome.
Hey.
Good to have you here.
Great to be here. Excited.
And I was just telling you earlier on that you did a whole series of podcasts, and I feel like I'm on the spot because I'm partly an interviewer and partly on the other side of the table.
Yeah, actually, this is only the second podcast I've been on as a guest in my life. So I also feel like I'm on the other side of the table as well.
Okay.
The pressure, there's more pressure being a guest, I think, than a host.
Possibly. Well, anyways, but you are on the stage, literally and metaphorically, because you are the founder and artistic director of The Bridge Theatre.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, I tried to remember the accurate terms.
Perfect.
Yes. Very good. So tell me more about your background, because you were an EU official, you were a semi-diplomat as an EU official, and you are now in the theatre world.
Yes, it's not an obvious combination, I guess. But as an adult, I trained as an actor and a singer. Prior to that, I actually did my undergraduate degree in German and Russian. So there was always something kind of international and linguistically focused in my brain, I guess. But I always wanted to pursue the arts. And I was so happy to attend a fantastic drama school, Guildford School of Acting, and worked in that field in theatre for about 5 years. But ultimately, I wasn't getting where I wanted to. I wasn't getting the auditions I wanted to. I wasn't getting the jobs I wanted. I felt like I also wanted to do other things with my life, wanted to see the world, wanted to use my head maybe a little more. And so at some point I took the decision to stop that life and retrained, studied international relations. And then I came here predictably on a blue book, on an internship like everyone else does. And yes, started working in the Commission.
European Commission, yeah.
Yes, in the European Commission. Did that a few years. Worked also in Transparency International. Was very lucky to become a diplomat, quasi-diplomat in the delegation in Jerusalem, in the EU kind of embassy in Jerusalem. And that was framed by 2016 Brexit referendum, which as a Brit really affected me and affected my prospects as a potential EU official. It wasn't like I had to leave, but it did constrain any promotion prospects, which kind of started me thinking, okay, well, what next actually? What do I want to do? And at that time, I wanted to, I joined the EU also because I want to make a difference, idealistic somewhere, as we all are to a certain extent. But I felt at that time, 2016, 2017, we were just discussing, Trump was in office, the growing right-wing tendency amongst governments. I felt that maybe my place wasn't in government, wasn't perhaps in the public institutions, and maybe I could make a difference in a private way, through the private sector somehow. Not thinking about theatre at the time, but at the same time, kind of parallel to that, theatre I was missing it. I was missing the creativity. I was missing the world. I was surrounded by people doing their 9 to 5, sitting at their computer. And I wanted, I craved a bit more, people jumping around and doing silly things. And so those two
which is not what describes theater, but
yeah, or doing sensible things. Yes. And then those two ideas kind of combined at some point. And I was like, hey, I think you can also change the world through theatre. Let's try this out. And actually, my original thinking was to go back to the UK and establish a small-scale rural theatre somewhere in the UK and really work at a local level to bring the joy of performing arts to people in general. And I really believe that people can learn a lot about themselves and their relation to the world through engagement with the performing arts. And then at some point, I had another light bulb moment of, hang on a minute, Brussels is a great place for this concept of English language theatre. One of my first experiences of living abroad was in Frankfurt. And in Frankfurt, you have a very well-established English theatre. It's been there since the 70s or even the 60s. The oldest, and you have this concept around Europe. The oldest one is Vienna, but in other places, I don't know, Gothenburg, Barcelona, Prague, you have this concept around Europe. And I was like, why does this not exist here in Brussels? When, as we all know, or the people who live here, we know that it's a very English-friendly city. There's a lot of English being spoken in daily life. So then I was like, that's it. Let's do this. And here we are today, basically.
And this was year?
This was 2021.
2021.
Or the concept started in 2020, and then we established as an organization in 2021. So it kind of took a year of thinking about it, formulating my ideas, to then, becoming a reality and deciding, okay, I want to quit my role, my, full-time paying job working for the European Commission, and go into this precarious freelance life where I don't necessarily know anyone in the field here in Belgium, and it's a very different world. So I had to make that quite conscious decision.
And when you create a theater, not that it's such a common endeavor among most people, but you set your mind to creating a theater. What is it that you do first, second, third? What are the steps to that? Is it the audience? Is it the actors? Is it the production? Is it the venue? What is it?
Well, exactly. That's the big question when you're like, okay, let's do this. And I guess the first thing, I think creating theatre as in a production, a show, a play, that is a lot of time, effort, money. It's a big endeavor. It's a big project to undertake. And you need a venue, you need an audience, you need all these things around it. So I guess the first component was actually doing the basic market research and finding out the different players around, finding out different potential partners, trying to spread the word out there. And we did this partly through, one of the first things I did was actually create this podcast that we mentioned earlier. And that was partly just because I was like, there is no legitimacy to this organization because currently we haven't done anything yet. So like what makes it a theater and there's no output, and how are we going to get people to kind of take note of us? And so it was just a way of getting out there to begin with, being like, hey guys, we exist, and starting to build a community, many of whom today are still kind of with us.
Yeah. Just wanted to interrupt for a second. So the theater's name is The Bridge, right? And the podcast was about the creation of a theater, right? Like not about a play or anything else, but the actual process of setting it up.
Exactly. Yes, that's correct.
Tell me more about that.
So yes, it kind of had a twofold purpose, I guess. Yes, to chart the creation, because I thought it might be interesting to, for anyone interested in cultural entrepreneurship or just what is the journey actually of this process. And then we also used or we charted the journey by interviewing different relevant people who we might be interacting with at that time. So it could have been yes, an actor, or it could have been a theatre translator, a playwright, or it could be someone a bit more kind of removed. So someone who is an architect of theatres, or it could be a sound engineer. So I really wanted to look at different aspects of theatre so that people kind of see the different things that are involved in creating a theatre, which is, there's this old saying, it takes a village to create theatre, and it really does. You need a lot of different people, a lot of different expertise in order to make that, especially a physical space, happen.
What's a benchmark of success? And there's the obvious one of a lot of viewers, or a lot of audience, or ticket sales, or what have you. But for you, what is it that truly shows that what you've put together is successful?
It's a great question. I think satisfaction, ultimately. You are providing services to people to make their lives a little better. So maybe I should explain a little bit about what we do. Maybe I'll do that in a second. But I think seeing happy faces is the benchmark for me, really. Seeing that people are enjoying what we're putting out there and enjoying interacting with us. There's a song that comes to mind, I'd rather be 9 people's favorite thing than 100 people's 9th favorite thing. So it's better to be really looked and respected by just a small group of people. I think that's a really nice way of looking at it.
And when you say smiling or happy people, well, maybe they could be crying and be extremely satisfied in the sense of they've learned something about the world or themselves through your art.
Yes, exactly. Yes. We want an emotional response, and ultimately that's why people, I hope, go to the theatre, in order to get some kind of emotional connection to a subject matter, to some material.
Yeah. So going back to the beginnings and the process of setting it up, where did you find huge roadblocks or challenges? And I know it secondhand, so to say, that the venue has been an issue, but tell me if that's the right understanding.
Yeah, I think there are 2 or 3 main issues to what we do. So we make productions. We also do lots of workshops and classes for the community. We work with schools, and we also work with organizations providing different training opportunities as well. So we have quite a broad range of services that we do. I think that as you mentioned, finding venues to do any activities was much more difficult than I was expecting. And now that I'm aware of the world, I mean, as in the Brussels cultural bubble, I know that it's an experience shared by people here, and it's a peculiarly Brussels phenomenon, unfortunately. So it's quite hard just even to find one of the first things we did was to run workshops for the community, to do classes, and even just finding spaces to do that was very difficult.
Workshops on
theatre, musical theatre, so different aspects of getting involved. So we have now, we're very lucky, we have a studio space in Saint-Gilles where every day of the week we're running different classes and workshops. We have about 150 people come through our doors every week in 13 or so different classes. But it was very hard to get to that point because we couldn't find spaces to do these activities. But then also, so yes, for workshops, for classes, for people, and then rehearsal space for our professional productions, and then actually finding performance spaces as well was very, very difficult, partly because of how the cultural infrastructure here is used, which I don't think is the most kind of efficient use of the spaces there are many theatres and cultural spaces here in Brussels. For the size of population, 1.2 million people, there are lots and lots, but it's difficult to get in the door, or some of them have restrictions, like you can't rent it for a long period, or they'll say, yes, you can rent it, but you can only charge ticket prices of up to 15 euros. So there are like economic considerations to take into account as well when we're looking at spaces. What we found most useful for the moment, or most promising, are non-traditional theatre spaces, which makes it exciting for us because each time our audience comes to our productions, they're in a different space, maybe an undiscovered space. So I'm talking, for example, we were talking about a production you saw, Grounded, which was 2023, and that was in Full Circle, which is a members club here in Brussels. And they have an events hall in the back, which they use for galleries and talks. So it's a multi-purpose space. And yes, you can. And we imagined that we could do theatre there, and we did do theatre there. In fact, we did 2 different productions there. But it's not traditional theatre in the sense of there are seats there are lights, there's all the technical equipment. So venue is one issue. Maybe I'll move on to the other ones, or
yeah, let's hear about it.
Yeah. So one other issue of Brussels, again, is a peculiarly Brussels issue, and here we're kind of getting to what Brussels is getting the word out there, actually finding avenues to let people know about activities taking place is very difficult. And I think that boils down to the fact that we don't have one coherent media landscape in the city. We have fragments of media, which means that, and we all know this is why Brussels, we find it very bubbled, and that's part of our raison d'etre is to connect Brussels through culture, because it's a very bubbled city with people looking at different sources of information and finding out what is happening in different languages in different ways. And just maybe to clarify that we have in Brussels 2 different language communities, each with their own governments, which also support their own press. So you have French language press and also Dutch language press, but then alongside that, you also have the international community, a lot of the times using English. So then you have the English language press as well. And they don't all see what we're doing as interesting to their audience. And also the English language press here is often focused more on EU politics. So it's not necessarily local news. So that's a tricky thing. So how, and I think, as a citizen of this city, I do find it difficult sometimes to find out what is going on actually culturally or otherwise. And you really have to know where to look to find these things. So I think that was also a challenge that we faced. We still face, but we faced especially early on.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. There are different media outlets. You have Brussels Times. You have a couple of other news sources in English, because that's your primary target audience. But there's just so many people here who are fluent in English, and they enjoy taking content in English. So presumably it's a large enough audience that you target. And yes, I was at your show called Grounded, which was fascinating. It was unbelievable. One person monologue for an hour and a half, roughly, and it was very, very deep. So it was a great experience, and it was a full house. But I think the production it didn't have so many runs, or I don't know what's the term, how many times you showed it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're currently looking at around 3-week runs. Yeah, exactly. So performances over 3 weeks, maybe 18 performances, something like that, 14, 15 performances maybe of each show. And I think that we are currently, the amount of people who come to our productions is like a fraction of the potential people who could be interested. I think I'm heartened to know that, when I go out and speak to people, maybe 50% of the time, someone will say, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Like I've heard of the British Theatre," which is already fantastic for me, because that I've seen that evolution over time. But 50% of the time, they haven't heard of us. So there's still a lot of people to reach, to just be like, "Hey guys, we exist." And that's,
we'll do our best with this show.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah,
put the word out there.
But I think it's just an interesting context in which to operate. And I think that, people have their own bubbles of information, and even the internationals living here, they're quite often looking to their home media as well for their news, etc. So they're not necessarily plugged into what is happening here. And I think that goes in the same direction a little bit of, and I see things changing, but it goes in the direction of what people like Tom Moylan with Restless Brussels was doing, to try and activate people, to get them more involved in the local, what is happening here in the city, which we live in Brussels, but some people kind of treat it not as the place that they live in really. And I think we're trying to also contribute to that process of being like, hey guys, like you can also stay here for your weekend instead of traveling elsewhere, because we've actually got some cool events happening. You'll really enjoy yourself. And I hope that, by doing that, we're helping to integrate international, primarily English-speaking people into Brussels a bit more.
Yeah. So going back to the theater, so you put those variables in place to the degree you could, and you launched your first production. How was that?
Really scary. Really, really scary. Very scary.
Why so?
Because it's a big commitment. It's a big financial commitment for a start. A production budget, or that production, the very first production budget was about 80,000 euros. So for me, and basically without any institutional support. So for me as an individual, that was quite a scary undertaking to make. Plus, you have this the pressure, I guess, of making some kind of impact, and also the pressure of suddenly engaging creatives in something real. And, for that production, we brought all of them over from the UK to come and make that production with us. So I think it was like the moment of truth, really. It's like, okay, we're going for this. And actually, we are going for this. Okay, yes, like press the green button, go. Okay, launch, we're going.
There is no way back.
There's no way back, exactly. Or yes, exactly. There is no way back, and you just have to keep pushing forward. And I think that that first production, which we did in October, November 2021 at Full Circle, that actually came a little bit earlier than I had kind of planned in my head, considering we only established the organization in February 2021. And just because the opportunity arose, because Louise and Bridie, who run Full Circle, they were kind enough to say, yes, we would love to have you use our space. And that was the slot they had available, because also they have to balance their different activities.
Which show was it?
A fantastic play by a British writer called Philip Ridley, and the play's called Vincent River. And it was a very hard-hitting play, talking about going out crying, about a guy, like an 18-year-old guy, who comes into the house of a 50-year-old woman, and you're trying to work out what this kind of relationship is, and you find out that the woman's son has just recently been murdered. And you're like, who is this guy? Is he the murderer? I'm not quite sure. And it turns out that this guy was the son's lover. So, and there's this whole, and this is set in East London in the 1990s, I think. And so it's about, homophobic, hate crime, etc. And I was drawn to it, as I think I am with all the plays that we choose, mostly because of the writing. The writing was just so gripping. And when I first read it, I just couldn't put it down, because it was this thriller happening in front of my eyes.
Do you read it as a script, or you read it as a book and you turn it into a script?
No, this was an existing script. Yeah, so we
specifically adapted for theater.
Exactly. We primarily work with existing plays that are already written by playwrights. So this was written in early 2004 or something. Yes.
No, it's very interesting, because I hadn't thought about it in decades, but now as you say it, I'm reminded, you say Beckett, for instance, Waiting for Godot and plays like that, which are written like plays. Now, again, I'm not in that art world of knowing whether it's meant to be a theater play or it's a dramatic instrument by a writer, to put it that way. But it makes it much easier to read and much more vivid, so to say, to picture, to imagine a scene, the conversations and the whole dynamic of it.
Yeah, I mean, I love reading plays. I was reflecting on this actually the other day, that I find, maybe because I find plays much easier and more gripping to read than a novel, and maybe it's just because it's shorter and my attention span, etc. But I visualize so much more easily with a play rather than a novel, I feel, in my head.
Indeed. And so going back to that play, it played out well. Excuse for the lame pun, but it seems to have worked.
Yes, I mean, again, we're talking October, November 2021. We're still in COVID here. It was kind of, people were coming in masks. We had here the COVID safe ticket, so the entry to venues. Kind of seems mad now to think back at it, that we were doing it at that time with all the risks involved in that. But I think I'm still surprised how many people we managed to reach with that production. I mean, at the time, I was disappointed by how few people came to see it, but actually looking back at it, I'm still like, where did they hear about this? How did we actually manage to reach these people when we had no track record? There was the people, no one knew who I was or the team was or anything, and the play is not like a well-known play or anything, and the people who were involved in it are not well known. So from looking back, I'm like, this was a fantastic start, really nice start, and the play itself artistically was fantastic, but it's funny because me as the producer of these plays, I'm never worried about the artistic side of it, because I think when you get a good play, a good show, and you combine it with good creative people, I think the outcome is usually a good outcome. And for me, it's the other logistic things that actually were top of my mind, like how do we deal with people, like the ticketing system, all these other like logistical things that we also have to deal with, being kind of like almost a venue without a venue, basically.
What makes people go watch a play. So what is their primary motivation? Is it the fame of the actors? Are they interested in the topic? Or maybe they are just theater deprived and say, oh, finally something, at least I can get my fix to get some art into my life with live performance. So what's your take? I guess it's all of this to some degree and depends on the person, but what's your understanding looking back all these years?
Yeah, we do actually ask people. We like to send a survey after the show to kind of ask people, why did you actually come? What made you come? I don't have the stats in my head, but a lot of people come to support us actually. So, but I guess they're not just supporting us; they're supporting culture and art in general. So that's why they buy the ticket, and I guess they want to be challenged by something in the theatre because they know that that's probably what we're going to give them based on our track record of the 7 shows that we've produced so far. Of course, there are some people looking for a fun night out, but I think that here in Brussels, again, our primary audience is not only, but mostly the internationals. And I think that they are not necessarily in the habit of going to the theatre. So for us, it's like trying to build in this habit. I mean, they might be in the habit of going to the theatre in their home country, but in Brussels, it's like they don't necessarily think about it. They think about going for dinner, for drinks, maybe to a concert, potentially to the opera as well, but not so much to the theatre. So we're trying to build in that habit a little bit more with people. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, why do I go to the theatre? I go because I want to be touched by the heart and touched by the head as well, as in I want to be intellectually motivated or inspired and emotionally inspired as well, and those two things have to go together, and I hope that that's also what our audience members experience as well.
I have kind of a question which is a common sense question, but still I will ask because I'm curious about which direction you'll take. Why is theater so different from screens, from movie theaters, from Netflix at home and all the other entertainment forms?
Yeah, it's a great question. Exactly. And it's something that I often ask myself as well. And we get sent new scripts quite a lot, and I do try to read them as much as possible. But one of my questions in the back of my mind is always, why should this be a theatre play, not another art form, not exactly TV or a book? Why a play? What makes it? I mean, I think there is something you can do. First of all, seeing people in real 3D, they're literally 3D in front of you. I think that's always magical. In a screen, okay, screens are getting better and better, and I'm sure we'll get 3D glasses at some point, and it will look 3D. And you have the experiments like the ABBA show in London, which is all holograms, and they look completely real. And I think that will come more and more. And I'm very interested in the cross section between theatre and technology. But I think still seeing real people on stage doing something live right there, I think that is intriguing. And I think that there is also something about the fact that it's live means something could go wrong. And I think that we kind of like that. We're like, we don't actually know exactly what's going to happen. And that's actually the joy of live theatre. And that's what we say, like backstage, like things can go wrong. And that is literally what happens. Things go wrong all the time. And that's fine. That's why people are paying their money actually to see something that maybe other people haven't seen on a previous night. It's not always the same every night.
That makes me think it's not something I thought about before, but it's a very valid point. I find it's that risk, as you say, it could go wrong. And there is this, it keeps the attention and it keeps the connection and it makes it much more real because of the lack of perfection, because it can, the actor might forget their line or some mishap could happen, and that's part of the deal, and that's what makes it much more authentic. So perhaps it plays into the authenticity, whereas a movie is kind of chiseled to perfection. Now there are lots of bad movies, but at least the effort probably has always been to make it as good as they can. And there's nothing that could go wrong aside from the internet being cut out or electricity being turned off. Right? It's a very different. Exactly. The experience part of it is that risk element that contributes to it.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. So yes, this jeopardy from an audience point of view, I think that's interesting. I think the other thing that you can do with theatre, which is a bit more difficult in film, for example, is you can be a bit more fantastical or take people slightly out of the reality than you can in a film. I always think, for example, musicals work much better on stage than they do in film, because in film things are real normally. Okay, yes, it might be a fantasy, or things might happen which are not real, but somehow in theatre you can do more things. You can have someone speak to the audience directly, and that's like fine, or you can have two things happening on stage at the same time in completely different places, or you can just do interesting things with theatre in a storytelling perspective that aren't like, real, someone standing where they are. I don't know. Yes, because ultimately they're standing in a theatre, and the audience is make believing everything around them as well.
How interactive is theater? Because could be formats where the audience is involved, or the way it's being spaced or located, that the actor or actors might be in the center of the stage and the audience is around them. And again, it doesn't make for interaction, but it's still somewhat of a different format to say, hey, you're part of the play in some sense. Or there's a direct way of involving audience. I mean, it can go towards the showbiz and go to the hypnotist on screen or on stage, and all the way to the magicians. That's a very different genre. But how do you see those formats? Are you more conservative in that sense, in having actors and the audience watches the play, or there are better ways of engaging them?
Yeah, I think, again, this comes to the difference between theatre and film. You enable this interaction to some degree. I think as a producer, I love it, and I think it's really interesting. And I think one thing I learned, which I didn't really know before, but is the difference. So in the UK, it's actually quite common to have different kind of setups of theatre in the round, so that people are sitting all around you, or we have other concepts like traverse, so the audience is just sitting to the side, or thrust, so they're on three sides, or different kind of variations. Here in Belgium, it's very, very standardly end on, so you have a stage over there and the audience is sitting and all facing the same way. And I love, therefore, with our audiences, to put them in different configurations, because I think that's more exciting for an audience. And by putting people in a traverse setting, or somewhere where you get to see the other audience members opposite you, and you see their reaction, and that can be a bit awkward, or it just changes something a little bit in the performance. So as a producer, I think you can do some really cool and interesting things. I think as an audience member, I hate any actual interaction. I think it's many people's fear, right? For an actor to come be like, you come and join me on stage, I would hate that. But as a producer, I think it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering, because people go there for entertainment and not to work. So
exactly.
Not to have to, like, it's a bit more passive.
It's more passive. Yes, yeah, 100%.
No, but it's interesting for me, these experimental formats, and even improvisation, where the actors come up and there's the dynamic or unexpected element, even to themselves, as to what they're going to say. Have you had shows like that, or planning to do that?
I mean, the improv scene here is quite well developed. We actually have recently done a show, and we're now showing it to schools, called The Complete Works of Shakespeare. And it's like a comedy of all the Shakespeare plays kind of packed into one show. And that it's scripted to a large degree, but there are elements of improv, and that is also fun to play with, because then the audience doesn't know, is this meant to be happening? Is this not? Does this happen all the time? And I like that blurring of those boundaries. I think it's really nice. Yeah, so I think that improv is a really nice way of theatre. In our studio in Saint-Gilles, we host external events as well, and one of the things we like to host is this storytelling evening, which is where people come up and tell their stories. It's a bit like stand-up comedy, but without the comedy element. I mean, they can be funny stories, but they don't necessarily have to be funny. And I think that's also a really nice way of presenting theatre. It's not theatre. It's kind of theatrical, but it's not theatre per se. But it's nice. Ultimately, we're in the business of telling stories, and so that's a really nice way of doing it.
And then there's an audience for that who listens.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Is it popular?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. And it's a concept that is originally, I guess, from the States. The people I know doing it here, they've learned their craft in Amsterdam, where it's quite big, and they're trying to bring it more here. And I think I think it's a really nice, very human way reminds me of people sitting around campfires sharing stories. It's very simple, very basic human thing, and we need to we need to be sharing stories more, I think, and we kind of have lost that art a little bit.
That sounds fascinating. Okay, you'll tell me more about it, or in practical terms where to go and where to look that up. I like that. I'm just reminded, I saw that I even tried, I think once, there's a different format called Pecha Kucha. And the Pecha Kucha, it's slightly different, and it's kind of borderline business, but it could be storytelling. And the whole idea is that you have 20 slides that you can use, and it automatically changes every 20 seconds. So 20 times 20, which I think makes for, what is it, something like 6 minutes 40. I might be off with my maths, but that's roughly the idea. And it automatically changes, so you definitely need to keep a pace. You're not the one changing the slides that help with your story, so you have that set amount of time that you must present whatever idea or story you want to present.
I mean, it ties into the idea of having constraints makes us creative, actually. And that time constraint, you have to be creative in order to get the content through that you want to in that little time period. But we face that with our creatives. You know, we go into a building, there's like not enough electricity to power all the lights that we need. What do we do? Or like there's only access via stairs. How do we get all the equipment up the stairs? Or what equipment can we bring? We can't bring everything that we wanted ultimately. Or something arrives late. How do we overcome that issue? So there's always like overcoming constraints leads to creativity, I think.
Any war stories to share?
In terms of producing theatre?
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, just for the last production, Tick Tick Boom, which took place in October 2025, you know, it was my mess up. Well, it wasn't my mess up, but we ordered this very specific, in English, we call them warehouse steps. And they're quite like, which are basically steps that you go up in, like you have in a warehouse, you wheel them around, you go. Anyway, we ordered some of these steps for our set, and they just didn't arrive when they said they were going to arrive. And then like, it was like a day before the show basically. And so I had to like ring around trying to find these steps. And they're really, in the UK, they're very common. It seemed like, at least in Benelux, you can't find them anywhere.
You go to IKEA and...
No. Yeah,
okay.
they're really niche products. So anyway, that was,
okay.
For example, I mean, I don't know.
These small things, but I'm curious, it made me curious about procuring all the equipment, which is more for backstage, I guess, but even on set. So where do you get that stuff from? It's you look around friends, there's stuff for rent. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of physical things, you have costumes and props, set pieces, and then like the technical equipment. I think costume, props, and pieces of set, they're always quite specific. Like the director might want a phone from a white phone from the 1960s or something. So you have to be looking for these things and trying to find places to source things. And I think over time you learn where are good places to source different items and not. I mean, the same with costume as well. For set pieces, then we usually build them. So we have a very good technical guy who we work with, and they'll get built. And then we hire all of our technical equipment basically from different companies. Like the lights, the sound equipment, we'll hire that just for the production.
Just for the production. Okay. And how important is that in the actual experience? The light, the effects, the extra things that make the play, I think, more visible.
Extremely important. I think that's something that I notice is overlooked here in Belgian theatre. I think that, I mean, because we work mostly with Belgians and British creatives, I think that the UK really excels in light design, in sound design. And I think that it contributes to making a cohesive production, which is magical, I think. Especially a really nice lighting design can really make a show exciting and something that isn't just putting some actors on a stage and like lighting them from the front. You want something that is exciting, and that's why we always seek to work with fantastic light designers. The last lighting designer we worked with for Tick Tick Boom, he's actually won an Olivier Award, which is like the British Theatre Awards for his lighting design. So for us, that's quite an important part of things.
So that's the professional lighting design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they're designing how it looks, and it plays a massive part in the visual aspect of it. Also the sound. But the sound, obviously, they always say with sound, you don't notice it until it goes wrong or until it's not there. But
yeah. I see from the corner of my eyes, our producer is probably nodding. Yes,
exactly. So it's like the invisible, but you need it in order to make the production, yes, coherent.
And it's interesting how the lighting is so important. One question that I thought about asking is the notion of time. Because my sense is that's so different from the rhythm, the cadence, the sense of time when it's a theater play. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are compared again to the movies or to screens. Because you being there, there's this synchronicity happening and maybe much less distraction. You're socially much less wired to taking off your phone or getting up and getting a snack or just interrupting the show. So there is this continuity as well, so that the whole experience is different.
I mean, back to your question of benchmarks of success, I think that also a benchmark of success is when people come out and they're like, oh, it's over already. Like I didn't feel the time go. I think that's because your attention is gripped by what is happening on stage. I think that's for me always very satisfying. But I think your attention can also be gripped with film, of course, like, and you don't notice the time. But I think you're right. You point to a very big difference, and it's something that people point out to us is this lack of screen time. Actually, like it's a moment where socially it's not acceptable to look at your phone during the theatre, but also during our workshops, during all of our training sessions as well. People's phones are away. They're very much face to face with other people, be it on stage or in a workshop setting. And I think, and people comment on that actually, in that they appreciate that moment of kind of being forced to not get out their phone, which is really nice. Yeah.
And what about technology in theater? So you mentioned briefly or referred to it, and we're not talking cell phones and the like, but how has technology impacted theater? Would you have digital stuff on screen, or would you involve some other physical or other type of tech in the production?
I think we're just starting to explore what that means, technology. I mean, first of all, it's already had a massive impact in terms of, first of all, lighting design. You basically only have LED lights these days, which can do everything. They can move, they can change color. That opens up a whole world of possibilities, where before you might just have had a white light, which you put like a color gel in, and then it's just that color. So already, and from a sound design also, it makes everything different. But I think that there are other things I mentioned earlier, but there are other interests. So that's holograms on stage, which look real. I think that's so cool. I think there's, I'm also, so I sing in a choir here, and I'm also in this production at the moment called Luminescence, which is a 3D mapping.
You're involved?
Yeah, in the cathedral, and it's really impressive. Again, through these really probably very expensive projectors, which are 3D mapping onto the cathedral walls, and it's just so big and impressive, and I'm curious as to where you can go with technology in theatre and what that means and and if you can do I also went to see there's a Stranger Things play in London, so we went to see that a while ago, and they do this blurring between what is projection and what is real, and you're not quite sure actually sometimes. So yeah, there are cool things you can do with technology, and I think we're just discovering that. But it's expensive. Sorry.
Certainly expensive at that scale, and I think it's a difficult dilemma because, for instance, what comes to mind is Lego, and Lego has been sort of traditional toy game creative thing that kids would build whatever their imagination allows or more complex things, and yet building in digital stuff and creating an interaction with iPad designs or with robotics and all the rest, and there's, I think, this two schools or different directions to say, well, should it stay analog because that's what it's mostly about, or should it actually rise to the call of times and say technology is everywhere, so it needs to be somehow blended in with the right proportions? And I was just curious how it affects art.
I mean, but then the key thing at the moment is obviously how AI affects copyright and and authors. Yeah, authors' copyright basically. What the AI will be taking, and there was an AI created actor, right? And what is that an agent was plugging a few months ago. So I think. But then it's just for us to learn what is responsible use of AI, and I think in technology in general, what that means. And I think that if there's still creativity involved and you're using technology to further the creativity, that's exciting. And I see it as enabling us to do more and more and more exciting things. However, at the same time, I think that part of the reason why I like these storytelling evenings, for example, is because it's so simple, and actually maybe we're losing sight of what it is. Why do we go to the theatre in the first place, and what that is? And if we're putting loads of flashing lights on it, which is looks really cool and is amazing, and I love that too, maybe we're kind of losing the heart a little bit. So I think there's a balance.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at, and I think it's an eternal dilemma in everything. Is do you stay with traditions? I say that in a broad sense, is the way it's been done and way theater has been performed for centuries. Or you try to modernize to some degree, but where is that line where you're already losing the essence of what it used to be, and you're already doing something else, which is not necessarily better.
And I also think it plays into sustainability debates, honestly, because it's yes, you can do really cool things, but should you be doing those cool things, right? And it's the same in any industry or any sector, but these are questions that we also face creatively. Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should do it.
Yeah, and I just had this, well, it's more than a thought experiment. I guess it's a real thing that if someone were to present you an AI written play and say, hey, here's an amazing, inspired by Shakespeare, inspired by Beckett, inspired by whoever a famous person it is, living or dead, and it's a great play, and it's like a really good script with a deep story, with the right cadence and everything else, what would you do?
Yes, it's a good question. I don't know. I think that there is, and I don't wanna give an answer, because I think this is quite a difficult debate at the moment, especially because ultimately that script that will have been generated by AI is taking its inspiration from elsewhere, and they're not getting credited. But then that's like life, right? Like we all take our inspiration from other people and don't necessarily credit them because we're not necessarily consciously aware of it. I think I would be more into exploring that and using it. And I know that theatres have done that also in the UK, and even here, I think they've played with that just as an experiment more than anything. I think there's the moral dilemma of it. That's the question part for me. I think that we then also come to this, what is creativity? Because it also comes, for me, you know, I remember reading a few months ago, you know, we're entering a world where we all have our bespoke films, that like film is just generated by AI. We have it's just for us because it's what we want right there and then it's gone away. And that's like a mind-blowing kind of concept. I don't know how I feel about that right now.
Matrix?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. It's like, ooh. But I think from a creativity point of view, I come back to that jeopardy feeling, that feeling that things can go wrong, or that things is crafted by a person. And if we have that feeling of being crafted by a person, I think that's somehow that lands with us better, even if it's not necessarily created by a person ultimately.
I agree with you. I think there's again, going back to authenticity and also the imperfection, because the play is not meant to be perfect. There's a reason you curate it as a producer, as someone who puts it on stage, because it's your professional judgment, and you say, well, this is worthy of putting it on stage, and there's certainly the commercial aspect, saying it likely will have enough people to sustain it, but it's not meant to be the perfection. It's a shared experience. It's something that we as audience go there, we share that experience. Maybe I hate it in the end, maybe I love it, but at least there's something that we all shared, and we can relate to it in some way.
Exactly, and you're kind of getting to the point of why do we watch theatre? Why do we create theatre? And this shared experience factor of things is really important, especially for me, but I think for all theatre makers. The head of the Public Theatre in New York, Oscar Eustis, he famously said, theatres are modern day churches, right? They are one of the only places these days where we do actually gather together for this shared experience. Okay, yes, in the church it's usually one priest saying things, and actually the revolution of theatre, there's what in the Greek times was actually have two people having two different opinions talking on stage, and an audience watching that. But it's somewhere where we can gather, and you can have different reaction to your neighbor to the same content, and then you can discuss that afterwards. And that's really helpful, I think, for a society when we're so polarized and we all have our social media bubbles. To have some kind of collective experience, I think is really good.
And how much do you see the kind of plays that you choose and the topics that you pick to have agenda is a strong word, but to have a message, because you've chosen a play which was about a homophobic crime. You had play which was talking about the one I saw with the drone operator and the ethics and the dilemmas around war and all the nastiness that goes with it, and then how a person's individual life story changes because she gives birth to a child, and just all those things that go around it. Is there a deeper message in the kind of plays you put on stage, or you say, okay, well, it's something which is very light, or you put the Wizard of Oz and it's just as good?
So yes, I think ideally, yes, we say that we produce socially relevant theatre, which maybe we should reformulate, because for me that's actually a bit too broad. But we like to produce theatre that is connected to the debates that are happening in society at that moment, and we want to be relevant, contemporary, in a cultural way, relevant to the debates and give something to that. And I think that each show itself will have a specific agenda, but however, that's not necessarily what people want to see. So that's also a little bit of a balance to make. You know, people also want to have a nice night out. They don't want to be lectured. You know, they don't necessarily want to cry. They might want to laugh. So you got to that goes into the thinking process. And for me, ideal is are plays that can make you laugh and think at the same time and are quite serious. And actually, our 2024 play was called Radiant Vermin, also by Philip Ridley, who is a writer who I really admire. But that struck the right balance of taking a very serious subject, which was basically a housing crisis and homelessness, and making it funny in a quite biting way. But it was a very entertaining show, but with quite a serious bite.
That sounds like a very good format, because I would not necessarily want to go to a theater where I know it's going to be heavy, that I know it's going to weigh on me, and perhaps it's really not what I need at the end of a busy week or in the middle of a busy week, whatever the show is. So that would discourage people. And there's certainly the entertainment part, and it can be just very light and inconsequential, and just purely you go for stand-up comedy or something like that. But even stand-up comedy has a lot of very important messages that it carries through the fun of it. So that sounds like a good format where you have a serious subject, but you package it in this sarcastic, ironic, funny, yet serious way.
Yeah, but it takes a very skilled playwright to do that. And so that's like, it's a golden kind of type of play that I'm always looking for. So if anyone knows out there of a play that is funny and is serious, has serious messaging, please let me know.
Because that's what I was going to ask you. Is it more supply-driven or demand-driven? So is it that you say, well, a big topic these days is A, B, or C issue, let's try to find a play on that? Or the playwrights would pitch you and say, hey, do you want to put a show around it?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really one process. For me, what has to be in place in order for us to like press that magic go button is we need a venue, and we need a play that would suit that venue, and then we need a director who will, because I don't direct these plays, a director who will then be available at that time and who could suit that format. So therefore, because there's a few variables there, I do have a long list of plays which I would like to do, some of which are from my own brain, and some of them have been suggested to me by different directors who I'm interested in working with. And then it's a case of balancing these three things, plus perhaps thinking about what is happening in the world, and what aspect do we want to highlight in the next 6 months or something, or trying to look ahead a little bit with a mystic ball to see what people will be interested in. But like so it's a mix of all those things that will come together to make that final decision of what we're going to do.
And being in Brussels, do you see your role as somewhat shaping or a little bit contributing to political discourse here, or trends? Again, not necessarily just on local level, because we have so many international institutions here. We have NATO, we have EU, we have many others.
Yeah, I think I don't underestimate the role of cultural institutions as a whole to be shaping the debates of a society, and we are well placed, given who is in our audience, to contribute to those debates or to make people have a think about certain ideas. And I also believe that is the role of theatre in a way, to make people think about things in a different way, or just to make people think about things that they're not thinking about in their daily life. Yes, I mean, I don't want to overplay our importance at all, and I mean, but yes, maybe in a small degree, we are contributing to people's thinking somewhat, which is a nice feeling as well.
For sure. And again, just thinking back to the one I saw, and unfortunately didn't get to see other plays, but the topics you're touching and these issues, once you see it, it's a different experience. And there's, again, we keep comparing it, or I keep comparing it or benchmarking it against the movies and online shows and the like. But an in-person play right here has a very different impact. So I think if it works, it probably works better than other genres. And if it doesn't, well, then no such thing. But it can have a very deep impact because of that physical proximity to the actor, to being a live experience, and all of that can really touch you more deeply.
Yeah, I think there are many reasons why it touches you more deeply. Exactly, it's live. Your full attention is on that without being distracted. You're in one specific place for that moment, and you're emotionally engaged with what is happening with that single story. And we use that kind of, that's why theatre is so effective, and we use that, not methodology, but that line of thinking in a way also in what we do in our other work regarding like our training, where we're using actors to do immersive role play type training, so that people don't connect with different materials, not just in a kind of intellectual way, but in an emotional way and physical way, because that's actually how we as humans learn best, emotionally and physically.
Tell me more about that. So it's no longer the theater bit, but again, using methodology of theater for different, training and workshops and learning. Yeah,
exactly. So part of our workshops for individuals are simply that, people who want to learn acting, and we give acting training for all kind of levels, from right beginners to people who've done acting for quite some time. And we do different, we have a choir, we do musical theatre, we do other things like drama therapy, which is kind of using drama to explore yourself and your relation with others. And then, yes, as I said, we then use actors and acting techniques to help people learn specifically soft skills, or mostly soft skills. So, for example, it might be how to have a difficult conversation with your colleague, how to lobby effectively, and we'll have the actors play out scenarios, but also then the participants interact, most importantly, with the actors to experience their learning, and then we have a discussion about this. So yeah, it's a really nice thing that we do, which has developed over time, and is not something that was kind of initially in the first concept of the British Theatre, but I'm really happy it's part of our portfolio of things that we do, because you really see it's the impact at the very local individual level of what you're doing on people, and you're not just providing like a fun experience, team building away day, but you're actually also hopefully giving them skills and something to reflect upon when they are in that situation of lobbying a decision maker, that they might suddenly remember, oh yeah, I did that training with the bridge once. Oh yeah, maybe I should try this approach, or something like that. So that's a really nice feeling that you're actually affecting people's lives.
And these would be actors who are on the other side, or who's participating in that? I mean, on the provider side, so to say.
Yes, we work with lots of different freelance actors here in the city. So it's always surprising to me how many mostly internationals, some Belgians, but mostly international actors of various nationalities, which is really nice. And a really exciting thing about being in Brussels and doing things in English is that you have this influence of different acting traditions. So we have a pool of actors that we work with for these training sessions, and they're really fun. Yeah. And we facilitate them as well ourselves.
I just had an idea, maybe it occurred to you before, but if not, here's a pitch: parenting. You could do parenting classes, and somebody acts as a teenager and the other one is a parent, or vice versa.
Oh, this is nice. I like this. Yeah. And what's always amazing is that our actors are so versatile that they do shock the participants sometimes in how believable and realistic and like to the point they are with the kinds of things they're saying. So yes, why not a teenagers?
Yeah, no, I think there would be a big demand here, because workplace, sure, everybody cares about it, but those who have kids, especially teenage kids, good luck with that.
So we do that kind of thing, and then we also do kind of more standard things like public speaking coaching, you know, using the skills that actors have, or team building. So we do kind of these sessions where you use drama exercises interactively, not for the point of performance, but just for the point of getting to know each other better, learning trust amongst each other, and things like that.
That's really interesting. And I was just telling Eva, my friend, your colleague, who a couple of weeks ago. So I back in Hungary, my brother took me to not a presentation, not even theater, but it was a special kind of event where you had a bit like in those talent shows, 3 or 4 experts sitting on stage, a psychologist, a communication expert, another person who's like in the corporate world. So different profiles. One was even like a hostage negotiator, or used to be. Okay. Anyway, someone who knows that world. And they would be given workplace scenarios and situations, and you had improv actors who would play it and essentially, well, visualize it and really present it. And then those experts would give feedback of what went wrong. Yeah. So it could be a workplace conflict. It would be someone asking for a pay raise, or somebody's overwhelmed and the boss keeps giving them extra tasks. So fairly common, say, everyday situations. And when the experts gave the feedback, the improv actors would adapt that feedback, change, and literally act it out. Yeah. And the audience was there a little bit involved with kind of hands up voting and those kind of things. But it was fascinating because I, as an audience member, learned so much of how one situation can play out differently in communication terms, in management terms. And you do need actors for that. It's not like somebody who's even a trainer would really be able to do it, because you need someone who is really in that role, and really the impatient, angry boss, the subservient employee, and all those different characters that were out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really happy you went to that. And it's also fun, right? Because ultimately it's kind of almost entertaining just to watch these and then to hear the feedback of the experts and to see them change. And at the same time, you're learning things. So really nice. Yeah. So our training is very similar. We just have an extra element of then the participants themselves get involved in the scenes with the actors, which is also fun.
Yeah, so that's exactly, I think, the line, a bit blurry, but you do it as a training, as a workshop. This was more, again, like an entertainment, infotainment. So it was a lot of information and learning, and yet there was the entertainment value, and it was in a theater space, and they were up on stage. So we were not that participating. It was hundreds of people there, but it was a very, very interesting experience.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
I take inspiration from that.
Yes, I would love to attend that kind of thing. Yeah. And given that we're in Brussels, again, there's this such intercultural element to it, where just different styles and different body language being just so different.
Yeah, and I think that what I find interesting about our sessions is that it quite often, the scenes themselves are actually just catalysts to opening up conversations amongst colleagues about these intercultural differences, or even generational differences sometimes in how we interact, and what the expectations are in our interactions sometimes, and how we come across also. And so it's really interesting for me to kind of enable these conversations that happen.
And what makes a good actor? Is a good actor someone who is as natural as if they were really just happened to be there, but acting as you would expect them as an individual in that situation? Or an actor is someone, do they enhance their gestures, the intonation, the overall, so they dramatize it, and still they are very good actors?
The key lesson that I learned in drama school is essentially that you need to get out of your head. And so we as humans, we're so intellectual, we're thinking all the time, but actually, in order to be a good actor, you want to always lead from the heart. But basically, you don't want to think about it too much. That often is what happens, and you see that in untrained or undertrained people acting, is they're thinking about it and they're trying to act, whereas an actor will just be, and they'll just let their emotion govern everything they do, whatever that is.
Of course, it's very difficult, especially if it requires some bodily changes to gain weight, lose weight, pump up, or be skinny or whatever. Yeah. And you're really so much that. And I've seen how sometimes actors go to such length as to really read up on it and go to a place where the original character lived or the hardships they went through, and there's just so much it meaning the character, that it really consumes them.
I think, and this is where also, yes, you are correct. I think that just reflecting on it, this is also where like film acting and theatre acting can differ slightly, because in film acting you have one shot, well, you have probably several shots, but several takes, but one shot to give it. You want to be in it. You want to. It's so close. It's so intimate. You want to feel those emotions 110%. In theatre, you're performing 8 days a week, the same show. You can't possibly feel all those emotions all the time. So essentially, your body will you will want to feel them during the rehearsal period, maybe, and feel what that feels like. But eventually, your body needs a shortcut to get there. And so I think you naturally desensitize. Yes, I'm sure. Like, especially if you're in a long running West End show of a year, you will. Some days you'll feel it more. Some days you'll feel it less. Like we all do. You'll perform better some days or not, but it'll be easier for you to kind of get out of it, because you'll be more detached from it. It'll be more like a bodily reaction rather than a emotional, physical reaction. We all play characters in our lives, right? Your training self or trainer self is not quite the same as you at home self, and so we're always putting on different hats and different costumes and different characters. And I really felt that working in policy here when I was working for the EU, I could see people putting on different characters, and I think there is this slight overlap in the world of work and home life versus you're acting. People are acting all the time, I feel.
And I just thought about for a second when you say yes, in every context we are in different role. Ideally not a different person. You want to keep some integrity and consistency, but still you are gonna act and speak and communicate differently in those contexts. And I think the transition is very important. It's not like you can't at the snap of your finger, now I am in my role as a dad or in my role as a business boss, and the next moment I am something completely different. So even for actors, I think perhaps there are some rituals or just mini transition methods where they transit from that particular role and then they become the one that they consciously choose. How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, people have different rituals, and especially if you're doing a repeat, like a theatre run, then people will go through like the same ritual every single day, because like if they don't follow that ritual, they feel it's bad luck. I know actors who like listen to a specific track before they go on stage to like get them in the right frame of mind, or it could be like it could be reading something specific. It could be anything, but yeah, people will have a certain, or it could be not related to getting you in an emotional place. It's just, every time I walk in this direction in order to get there, and that's just your ritual to do it.
No, it really sounds like there's a lot of meaning in it, a lot of depth, and because you are helping people discover themselves better, you help others see the world differently. That there's a lot of depth to that activity. And one more thing I wanted to come back to, you mentioned the drama therapy, exactly. So tell me more about that, because I have a notion in my head what it is, and I heard of it, but would love to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, as I said, so we do drama exercises or drama-based exercises with people, and that doesn't necessarily mean acting per se. It may be little improvisation scenes, but there are other kind of exercises you can do which are theatre-based, and it's like an acting class, but you just don't, the output is not performance, the output is self-discovery. So it's just a different emphasis on the output, basically, and that's a really nice way of people. Again, it's some people will go to a spin class or a gym class to kind of exercise themselves, and it's not physical. I mean, yes, it's physical. It's a different way of moving our body and getting acquainted with our body and connecting again the body and mind into one, and our emotional self. I mean, it's all these kind of like holistic things that we are a bit in fashion these days, and we know are kind of good for us, that we want to be healthy in some way, but it's a way of doing it, of exploring ourselves in a way that's fun as well, and it's not too deep ultimately.
What is it that they need to do? Are they given roles, or they need to talk about something, or is it the movement part?
Yeah, it will be different. So it could be games, drama type games, or it could be exploring physicality in a certain way. I don't know. Like, for example, there's a field of which is animal studies, where you really look at how an animal moves, for example, and try and kind of copy their movements as much as you can, even though we've got a human body. So, for example, that, and then you might reflect afterwards. Okay, how did that feel? What did that make you feel, both internally and externally? Yeah, and I guess it's the difference is this collective sharing that happens at the end of these sessions, which are kind of the it's not therapy, but the therapy part of it, where people open up and share.
Yeah, so there's a group debriefing and conversation around it, and also learning from your peers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really nice, and we do a similar one. We've actually is starting soon, which we've called Flow Workshop, and it's similar, but it's not quite. It's more looking at different soft skills and how we employ them in our daily lives, also through theatre exercises. Theatre is all about trust, communication, active listening, all these things that we know are important in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And that's what actors are doing every day on stage. So we kind of use those skills that we have built up on stage and put them into a different context.
Makes sense. And perhaps a final question before we get to our cards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's still there. Is if I had the magic wand and say, okay, you could have a beautiful space that is only yours, or you could have a set group of actors that you work with, or any other variable in this equation of putting great theater and great stuff up there, what would you go for?
Space, 100% space. I think that is the biggest block for us to doing more and more exciting activities. I think that without having a permanent space, which is ultimately our aim, we're not able to provide as many opportunities as we'd like. We've got different demands for things which we're not able to fulfill right now because we just don't have the space to do them. And it's just from a planning point of view, it's really difficult to make any plans when you're not sure what you can rent next, and you're always trying to find. It takes a lot of my time finding different venues, negotiating, seeing if it's feasible, all these things. So having a space of our own where we can produce our shows and also do all of our workshops, have a bar, cafe, a welcoming space, a cultural space where people can come and really serve the community that's around it as well. And also something especially people who want to be speaking English in their cultural activities, which is completely neglected here in Brussels. That would be a dream, basically. And we are always looking for opportunities to make that happen. We've had a few different kind of, not close calls, but we've had a few, we've explored some venue options previously. Yeah, and I'm hoping that something we will have some kind of future in a venue soon, hopefully.
Oh, nice. Very good. I actually had one more question I forgot to ask, which is I'm curious about the audience. Is there any pattern or something that describes the demographic who go to your shows, or they are as diverse as it gets?
It could be more diverse. I mean, I think that just from an economic point of view, our tickets we have to set our ticket prices at a fee, which is not necessarily welcoming to particularly younger audience members. So I think that's part of it. But it is, and I would say that still a good third of our audience are native English speakers, and then the rest being mostly European, but then you have other nationalities as well. And we have a small but growing kind of Belgian base of theatre goers as well.
Yeah. Well, if you put on a Shakespeare show or Shakespeare drama in the original version, good luck. Even native speakers might struggle with that. But
indeed, we do normally go for contemporary theatre, which is in modern day English for that reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, sir,
I get
for
to pick.
You to pick. Yes.
Oh wow, how exciting! You read it or I read it?
Yeah, if you could read it out, please. Yes.
What are your biggest flaws? Are they all this negative? Oh.
Yeah. Now you're in the spotlight.
I've been told I'm quite stubborn, which is good and bad. It means I don't give in so easily, and I'm quite persistent. But it can mean I wouldn't say I'm not inflexible, but I do like to have a good planning in place for things, and I'm reluctant to change that. I can't deal with spontaneity so well, actually, which is ironic because as an actor, I should be able to deal with that.
Yeah, but as a producer, it's probably an asset.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would say that. Yeah.
Fair enough. Sir, wishing you good luck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Enjoyed the conversation, and it's commendable that you put it on from scratch, and it's working, it's succeeding despite all the hurdles, and I really hope that the project can grow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.